Hey guys, today Jordan and I talked about fear and anxiety. It was really cool getting Jordan's thoughts and perspective on fear and anxiety, especially going through these crazy times in our world right now. So I hope you guys like it. Share, send to a friend. Have a great day. See you guys later. Hello, welcome back to the podcast.
Look
Mr.
down.
Jordan Weaver, how are you?
Mr. Jake McLane,
Yeah,
how are you?
I'm fantastic.
I'm just going to shadow everything that you say to me. I'm going to ask it. I'm going to turn it right back on you.
That's
We got ready to start. I don't know if you can see I'm wearing sweatpants. I look down and I've got chips all over me.
Listen, it's a relaxed podcast.
That's right. It's
You're
a good day
fitting
for
the
it.
vine. Yeah.
Storming here in Central
Stormy,
Oregon.
overcast, relaxed.
Good day
Speaking
for it.
of relaxed, this topic has nothing to do with that.
Okay.
The topic today is fear and anxiety.
Okay.
So,
All right.
in the world today, there is a feeling of shaky ground, and a lot of people are feeling anxious because they have no idea what's going on. What is the anxious feeling for, and what does God say about it?
So before we can get to like there's two approaches. There's like the flyover. There's like the Air Force 30,000 feet flyover view of fear. And then there's like the boots on the ground infantry version of what fear is. And so I feel like that sometimes when you're at boots on the ground infantry type level, I'm having to get my thoughts together here. I wasn't sure what direction we were going.
Right.
Sometimes boots on the ground fear feels like tyranny of urgency. Whatever's in front of you at that moment is all you can see.
Pause for effect. Okay.
Okay. Sometimes when you're in it, you're in the circumstances of 2020, like it's hard to recognize fear all encompassing.
Okay.
You think of fear as whatever's in front of you right then. If you can do the flyover of the function of fear, like the DNA, almost the genetics of fear first, then when you're in it, it helps remind you of like, oh wait, this is like, there's a pattern here. There's a pattern to how fear works. And if you can understand the pattern of how fear and anxiety work, you better recognize the symptoms that you're in at the walkthrough. So before we go to the boots on the ground walkthrough version of fear, the flyover is this, that in the Bible, they're the polar opposite of love. On the opposite end of that scale, your brain doesn't operate according to love and hate. Your physical brain doesn't respond to love versus hate. Your physical body is wired to function through love. Thank you. I got to bless you. Is function to go through love versus fear. So on one end is love, and that is this selfless, altruistic, outward-seeking version of care for someone else.
Okay.
Even at your own expense, right? Fear is the complete opposite. It's the survival instinct that says I have to take care of myself first because nobody else will. And even if that means it costs you something, I have to benefit in the end. It's me versus you.
Okay.
And so when the Bible talks about that the world fell, basically, like this sin is the ruling function of the world, you see the fear in everything. One of the most most evolved microevolution is something I think is so cool because we see it, we watch it happening on the planet. And animals that live near lions or tigers have these quick reflexes. Their survival is based on fear. Their reaction to fear, the quicker they react, the better chance they have to survive and pass on their genetic trait. The one that's kind of lazy and almost like curious and interested in what the lion's doing, they're dead, right?
Instantly.
And so if we understand that from a human perspective, we're constantly fighting that fear trigger. Like we don't want to be the last gazelle at the watering hole. Like, you waited around and look what happened. But that's what the gospel was talking about, was that like love comes in and it is this, God's in control. God is the ultimate final authority. I can live according to the laws of love, even in the face of the laws of fear that say, if I don't protect myself to your harm, to my good, then I'm not going to make it out of this. So I feel like that as Christians, we're always in this battle back and forth with, am I someone who's going to operate according to the laws of love or according to the laws of fear? Because fear, there's a book, and I talked about this book a lot, but the book is called A God-Shaped Brain. And it's been one of the most impactful things I've ever written.
All right. That's where we're at today.
Read
it.
Anyway, because I'm real smart, I read a lot.
Right.
But it talks about the function of how your physical brain reacts in moments of fear. It releases cortisol, and cortisol and shame are this like fight or flight. Like we go into fight or flight in moments of fear, but we also go into fight or flight in moments of shame. Like when you scare somebody, they either like run away or they attack. Right. Well, that's the same thing that happens when you catch somebody red-handed doing something they shouldn't be doing. They instantly attack and defend themselves, or they try to sever the relationship. So fear and shame functionally are so similar. And love and mercy tend to run in the same veins in the human brain. And so it talks about things like anterior cingulate cortex, your amygdala, the fear centers, the prefrontal cortex, and the relationship that all these have. But the function basically is your brain is its most healthy when it's operating in love, and it's its most damaging when it's operating in fear. So that's kind of the overarching sort of a thing when it comes to fear. If you were to look at 2020 and go, why are people feeling like they're on shaky ground? The loss of control makes us feel like that, well, if I'm not in control, life is instantly worse.
Right.
If I'm in control, then I can control the circumstances in such a way. I'm starting a series on Sunday that talks about the advantage of ordinary. You know, how being an ordinary person can be such an advantage. Being poor can be such an advantage. Being disadvantaged a lot of times when it's all said and done creates advantages in life, where growing up with too much advantages oftentimes turns into disadvantages.
Right.
And so those all have to do with a lack of control. Like when we can't control every puzzle piece on the table, generally God is more free to work in our lives in a way that's beneficial. We had this conversation the other day. You said it feels like I'm so close to things being okay, and then all of a sudden something's not perfect, and it gets your attention, and you want to work on that until it's perfect, because what the expectation is, life can be perfect if we do it right.
Yeah.
So when 2020 comes along and it's like, hey, I can't control anything, we instantly go through like, can I be okay if I'm not in control? And I would say that's probably the best description of where I see people right now in 2020 is the reality of I'm not in control. I disagree with so many things that are going on. I disagree with the way that people are treating each other. I'm so sick. I'm so sick of the way that people are treating each other right now, but I can't control that.
Right.
Is there a God of peace and a God of love available to me, even in circumstances that I didn't choose or that I wouldn't prefer? Can I still operate according to the law of love, even in circumstances like we're living in right now?
Right. Yeah. So what does God say about fear? Like law versus love, I guess. Right.
Right.
You could put your headphones on, by the way.
I don't know why I didn't.
Yeah.
Please hold.
Please hold. Pause for effect again.
Oh, that's so much worse. I can hear myself.
So much worse.
The expectation of law is a weird one. Socially, here's what's so crazy to me is like if you were to go to the grocery store, 60% of the people there think they can make the world perfect with enough law enforcement.
Okay. Yeah.
The small amount of majority, the majority by a small amount think with the right rules, we're going to be able to fix this whole planet. We're going to be able to do it. And if you're not following the rules, you're the reason the world's not working right. And that's true on both sides of the political aisle. That's not a left versus right thing. That's just people. People think there is a set of rules out there that can make the world work. And when you start operating according to love, what that means is it's not the laws that are going to make things perfect. God makes us perfect through this process of imperfection, through these things that reflect an imperfection. God does amazing, perfect things in our lives. But it's vitally important that we understand that doesn't operate within a strict set of you have to do this to make it work. Because that's like saying it's up to us to do God's part.
Right.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. A lot of people look to things, circumstances, and people for peace before God, before they go to God for peace.
I mean, I think that list is even longer than that. People, things, their puppy.
Everything. Yeah. And a lot of those things are slipping right now due to COVID and other things.
Yeah.
What are some practices that will help bring you to God for peace? Like instead of those things.
Well, a few years ago, I had a guy pointed out, I never looked at it, but on the Church of Satan, and you're like, what? Yeah, I know it's a left turn, but like the Church of Satan, the homepage on the Church of Satan, their basic idea was not Satan is real and we worship him. Mm-hmm. Maybe that was like page 3 or 5, or, hidden in there, you find out, oh wait, it is really as nefarious as it seems. But on the front page, it was literally because we believe that you are God. You are God. And so whatever you want is the ultimate right. Whatever you desire is the ultimate, that you have the right to it based solely on the fact that you want it. And that to me actually probably spells out the most anti-God version of humanity is that if I get what I want, if I get my plans, if I can put things together in a way where I can be in control, or at least can manipulate control or manipulate out of it what I deserve or what I want. That to me is almost like the most perfect example of the anti-God state of being, which is that God ultimately knows better than I know. And see, self right now is the number one sold item in the US. Our number one thing that we're peddling to people is self-elevation, self-importance, self-rights, these things that you deserve better than you're getting. That's the number one propaganda of the United States right now. And God comes in and goes, no, I get to be the most important. And that puts you in alignment. Like that when God gets to be the centerpiece of our faith. And that's what's so crazy is the culture of America says self-elevation, self-elevation, self-elevation. If we're not careful, you go into church, and what does the church say? Because it's surrounded with American culture, if we're not really careful, we start preaching self-elevation. Like God's a part of it, but it's still about you. He wants you to be rich. He wants you to be healthy. There's no sickness ever that's ever allowable that could be used by God. And so people are like, well, I've already been told that I'm the most important thing on the whole planet, that my self-elevation is the ultimate good in the world. And so if I can include God in that, and this continues on into the next life, sure, I'll go with that. And I think what we're seeing is the reality of like, it's kind of like getting to put a gauge. It's like we've attached a gauge to our spiritual walk in 2020. And what we're finding is all the words are there, but all the function's gone. So much of the function of what it means to live for God is missing, even in our religion and in our churches, because people didn't come with a self-sacrifice or a self-control or a self-submission concept. They came because they go, God, can you add? So when things get taken away and they measure how they feel about God, the gauge leaves us thinking like, wait a minute, I'm not getting what I came for.
Yeah. There's an interesting statistic that I looked up. The economy is now a significant source of stress for 70% of Americans.
70%.
70% for the economy. The government's response to the crisis is causing stress to 67% of Americans. And more than 1/3 of Americans have developed clinical signs of anxiety, depression, or both since the coronavirus pandemic began. And then that tied into this quote from Timothy Keller that I found. In the past, I thought you would like that. In the past, humans had a better grasp on how life was nasty and short. Famines and wars made life fragile. Today, we are high tech and connected. So new sorrows come up because of that. And so
That guy's so smart.
yeah, I mean, it
I'm sorry to everyone who goes to our church that I'm not Timothy Keller.
I mean, it occurred to me of so often for me, I look back to, if I don't, understand a feeling or something, I kind of look back to, to better understand it. I look back of, okay, what is anxiety? What is fear? What is fight or flight?
Right. And
I remember researching, and it said anxiety was when you felt alone, when you got separated from your tribe. Because if you have a tribe of 20 and there's lions everywhere and you got separated, that's death.
Yeah.
And so anxiety increases your...
So the isolation carried a real danger.
Right. Because it did. So, you didn't eat, you didn't sleep, you had adrenaline.
Yeah, you couldn't until you solved the problem.
Right. Because your brain was literally like, you cannot eat, sleep, or relax until you get back to your tribe.
Yeah.
So then why? Because we're surrounded by people. We're not in danger. Why do we feel anxiety now when we're surrounded by those things? It doesn't make sense. But I think it's because, maybe we're disconnected from how we were supposed to, live or feel or so on.
Right.
So
I've got my biggest problem, probably my biggest problem in life, and this will probably be the part that gets retweeted, but my biggest problem in life is that I don't understand my anxiety. Like there are times it just feels like I'm losing and I can't put my mind around it. I can't figure it out. And so it's not necessarily to your point about isolation. We are isolated differently now than we used to be.
Right.
Cause it's not like we have to defend ourselves against lions. So there's this sense of identity or that we're safe. People can be completely alone in a marriage. People can be completely alone in a family. They can be completely alone in a community, even though maybe their survival needs are met. There was Sebastian Junger, he's a author and a documentarian, and he said that there's a study that says that people living in big cities where they see faces all the time, but they're not known and they don't know who they're seeing. They're seeing a lot of people, but there's no connection. They don't know those people. Those people don't know them. That they are speculating that it actually clinically contributes to schizophrenia, because the wires are getting crossed in our brains in such a way that we know we're around people. We know the lions aren't going to attack us, so to speak. But socially and meaningfully, we are so isolated. You know, we see people, we talk with people, we interact with people, but there's no personal connection. We never feel validated or loved. And so if we were to go missing, so compared to the lion story, that if we were to go missing from the world, nobody would miss us. I mean, maybe like our page on our Instagram or Facebook or something like that, but we wouldn't actually be missed by real people. And that leaves us feeling very vulnerable to everything. All sorts of harm.
Yeah. How do you personally handle times of anxiousness?
Hang on, I want to read that real quick so I don't forget. When my dad ended up in the hospital in April this year in Texas, I had a major anxiety because I could not get there. I could not get answers what was happening to him. I never thought I had anxiety till that time. You know, I think Jason says, oh man, quit asking God for you to have control. Ask him to take control and give you peace with him taking the wheel. Yeah, exactly. I saw something the other day that says we need to stop asking Jesus to take the wheel. We need to ask him to pull over and take off his flip-flop.
Take off his what?
Flip-flop.
Oh.
That's a Southern thing.
Oh, yeah. Get after people.
Yeah.
Okay, I got you.
I think we all have a level of anxiety. I think anxiety is there for all of us. We all have the function of shame because like for me, it is shame. Like nothing makes me more feel more guilty. I've said this before. Nothing makes me feel more guilty than parenting because my kids are so different than I was. Like I grew up so singularly focused. I had one focus and one thing I wanted to accomplish in my life from an early age. I had one thing that I did to get approval. I had one thing that I did that would, you know, cause me to always be, you know, valuable to the family and things like that. So I was so singularly focused. I was always driven. I would walk in at night, roping the dummy. I would walk in as a kid. I mean, like Cody Shea's age, with blood on my hands where I roped through my roping glove, because I believed that was somehow going to like grant me access to a life that I didn't have. Right. And so my kids are so different than that. And in so many different ways, they're growing up so much healthier that I'm going like, are they supposed to be that driven? Are they supposed to be that locked on? Are they supposed to be that fierce and that intense about stuff? Because the reality was no matter how hard I worked at it, God ultimately had a plan for my life and that has carried out this direction. And so the anxiety for me comes from the further I get away from my original sort of singular goal, the more anxious I feel about like, is that okay? Is that something that's all right? And then my kids just seem to be sort of like, okay, they're just good. And so I'm like, am I doing enough? Am I creating those opportunities? Is there something I should be doing? And so to answer your question, my anxiety is never far away. As weird as that sounds, I grew up with my dad. And I was really close with my uncle, who's like a second dad, and my grandpa was like a third dad. Like I grew up with a lot of men in my life. None of them talk about anxiety. That's my friend Diego from Brazil. With any luck, Diego, if with any luck, we're gonna all get to meet Diego. I'm gonna try to convince him to come over here and hang out. That
would be awesome.
Hey, I love that guy. I wish you guys could meet him. Okay, I got to see him this winter. He was gonna come eat steaks in my house, and Fred Warnick messed all that up.
So you had a lot of men in your life?
I've always had a lot of men in my life that never talked about anxiety, ever. Like it wasn't a thing. And so now I'm going like, it feels real because I'm separating from the goals that I had when I was younger. I'm raising kids who kind of seem to not really have any necessarily specific goals. Is that okay? And so my frustration is I have to kind of talk through it. I'm constantly sort of working it out with Lacey. And I think Lacey, God love her, she's got to be kind of tired of it. But the peace comes in moments where I know that God sees me. That's it. Yeah. There's nothing more peaceful in my life than little specific moments where like I hear God speak and I go like, oh, okay, I'm okay.
Yeah.
Not only am I not in control, I can be okay with not being in control. I can live with that. It's, did I mess up somewhere? Am I a mile off course? You know, did my compass break or am I okay? It's just that, like I'm almost needy. I think that when God gets me to heaven, he's going to go like, hey, 4 stars. But that 5th star was that you're just always a little bit needy for confirmation. You're always kind of needing me to reassure you that you're okay. And anybody that's ever been in ministry, and I think anybody that's ever been in life would say, there are times where you're not getting the confirmation from God that you want.
Yeah.
Because it's so multidimensional that if he were to give you confirmation, you're going to continue. When in reality, he fully loves and fully approves of you. He wants you to kind of use that pressure to come back to the middle on something. And so God can't give me approval the way that I want it. And that causes me anxiety. And I'm like always working through like, God, I'm okay if I just know that you see me. That's it. I just have to know that you know where I'm at.
Right.
And that if I mess everything up, you'll still steer it the way that you want it to go.
Well, and that's what's crazy is because he does constantly, but we still need a feeling that he is right now.
Yeah.
You want feeling that.
You want to know a big one? I think this was for you and me both, is that the church has started growing online, and we were actually starting to get some not super positive feedback about like, why are we prioritizing online? This is back like January this year. Like, maybe we're pushing that too hard. Maybe online, you want to talk about anxiety because like there's a budget associated with it. There's people that are watching you and listening to your leadership, and you're like, I think this is right. I think this is right. I think this is right. And you're not sure. And then the Corona deal hits. And what was so validating for me that moment that God was kind of like, see, our church is now, if somebody can find a bigger one, tell me. But I think we're the biggest online church in the state of Oregon right now. I know we were, and I'm not sure if anybody else has passed us. We've looked just out of curiosity. You're like, why is that important? It's important because I'm a competitive person.
We're humans.
I'm a competitive person, dadgummit. But but to know that God had been preparing that even when I couldn't see, when I couldn't see what was coming, that 2020 has caused so many people anxiety. But in that regard, it's been a really peaceful year for me this year because God set it up for us to kind of work through it and I mean, dare I even say almost grow even a little bit throughout this process. And so where everybody else is, and I want to be aware of the fact that there are people that are kind of losing out or like things have dialed back for a lot of people, and I'm aware of that. I want to be conscious of that. But I've got a peace because I know that God put us in a position that when it all happened, we were okay.
It was just, click on.
It was like he had all the supplies sort of in the storm shelter, and we got in there. We're like, okay,
we're going to be okay.
But I also know that God purposefully allowed people to kind of lose out in some regard to move them a different direction. Again, if you don't have that concept of a personal relational God that knows the numbers of hairs on your head, if that's not your God concept, I don't know how you get away from the anxiety. What do you go to? Where do you go? You look at David, King David, he was an artist and a musician, and he, wrote songs and things like that. And he was a warrior. He's an interesting character in the Bible. But you go to Proverbs and you see it. You see like, why are people making my life harder? Why do these people constantly oppose me? Moses, same thing. What is going on, God? Why have you put me with these people that are so hard-headed? You don't see very many leaders in the Bible that didn't go through self-doubt and anxiety and worry. But as they're writing out their thoughts, they're writing, but I go to you with that. I trust that it's not up to me to do it exactly right, but that you're going to be there to sort of guide me through the channel, so to speak. That if there's something I need to be doing, just let me know, because my heart is that I want to be willing.
Right.
That's one of the biggest advantages of being an ordinary person. Just being painfully ordinary is you're almost always the most willing to submit to God.
Yeah.
You're inclined more than somebody who feels like, well, if I give in to God, I'm going to lose everything I've got. That's actually a disadvantage. Somebody that is so comfortable and so talented that the world is already rewarding them, that a reward from God seems less appealing. And so in those moments where you're like, why can I not break through the next level? That's mine, right? Why can I not, that next level? What is the next level? Do I even want the next level? But I'm submitted wherever God takes me. Wherever God takes me, just help me to learn to be okay where I am, rather than putting conditions that say, God, I would be okay if. Because what that's saying is I need God plus fill in the blanks.
Right.
And that's that's kind of the scary truth about fear in general, is what I'm saying is I need God plus.
So going back to, you said you talked through it. You talked through your anxiety, and you say maybe you annoy Lacey or so on and so forth. Is that how you talk through it, and is that how you feel better when you have anxiety or you have anxiousness or fear or so on?
I think that's one of the curses of being a communicator, is that I process externally. And sometimes I can't put my thoughts in order exactly like I want them to until I can kind of talk it out. And that's led to some arguments every now and then, like between Lacey and I, where I have to stop and be like, okay, I didn't mean that. I'm not even mad about this. It's not even, why did I even bring that up? Well, the reason I brought it up is I'm kind of sorting through what's actually bothering me. And so by having her that I can constantly balance things off of, sounds so stupid. People who do this are going to understand it. People who don't are going to think I'm crazy, but you almost hear your thoughts in a way that make more sense, and then you can kind of put them in order.
Right.
I'll say stuff sometimes I'm like, that sounds so stupid. Why did I feel that way?
Yeah.
And it's not until I hear it that it like, okay, that's dumb.
Have you ever had times when you said the thing that makes you like feel better instantly, like a rush of cool water to cool you down, is you feel God say, I see you, right? Yeah. Have there been times where you haven't felt that, or you haven't, heard that?
From about 14 years old till about 21 years old.
Okay.
And the reason for that is I was like, well, I can't be a Christian anymore because I'm just so bad at it. Like, I'm not going to keep doing this. I'm so terrible at it. And so I just kind of walked away from God. And so if God was ever like, I'm here, I'm like, no, right. I don't want to hear. I know, I get it. I'm terrible. And I think those years actually, probably looking back, will be some of the most beneficial, because I don't like being guilty. I don't like feeling guilty anymore. I don't like that feeling of knowing that I've caused damage, or that I'm responsible for something that is not positive. And you're gonna have goof ups, but at a general sense, I correct quicker now. And so, yeah, there were years where I felt like God wasn't anywhere near me, and I created some bad habits in my life that took a while to work through in that period. So it wasn't like it was all positive, but it did kind of set the course of like, wait a minute, this is for sure not what I want in my life. Mm-hmm. I for sure don't want to be running from cops. I for sure don't want to be living in the principal's office. I for sure don't, whatever the case may be. Okay. I for sure don't want that to be the story of my life. So now, even when it's painful, it gives you the opportunity to go like, well, it's not that. Mm-hmm. I don't know what it is. God, I don't know what you're up to. Mine is that people are going to give up. That's honestly, like, that's my biggest source of anxiety, is as we're working through this, that if I stop, Jordan stops pumping the well, the water stops coming. You want to hear something crazy? This is probably more Jordan centric than I intended to get today, but I was sitting out there watching the sprinkler the other day. We have this water reel, and it waters the arena before they're open. And I swear, I hate being bored. I hate sitting around doing nothing. Like, I'm a busy person. I literally sat there and watched the sprinkler, just watched it for like 2 hours. And the reason, as crazy as it sounds, it's this reel, and it's working, the water's working, the arena's getting worked. And it's just this deeply, deeply satisfying feeling to be able to watch something working without my specific involvement. Like, I'll work setting things up. I love working, setting things up and putting people in place, or like putting systems in place and stuff like that. But nothing is more rewarding in my life than when they take the system and run with it, and it doesn't take my involvement. And so to sit there and watch something that I'd set up start to work, I was like, crazy as it sounds, it speaks to the anxiety that's in my heart. Like,
you have to do everything.
Yeah.
And so on.
Yeah. Because I know that's not a good leadership model. I know it's a terrible leadership model to have my personal fingerprints on everything. Like, I would rather live with the disapproval of like, why isn't Jordan doing that? I can live with that. What I can't live with is if Jordan's not here, everything falls apart. Mm-hmm. And so there's constantly that battle of like, I'm not a very patient teacher in the early phases of anything. Mm-hmm. Once you get to a certain point, I think I'm a good help after a certain level, but like, that's another anxiety thing I have with my kids, is like, maybe I'm not getting them that anyway. But there's that point again of where God's like, I got it. Mm-hmm. Because what it allows me to do is like, oh, wait a minute. Mm-hmm. This is God's sprinkler. Mm-hmm. This is God's arena. This is God's church. These are his people. This is his cattle project. These are his employees. And what God needs from me is to be okay. Mm-hmm. God needs me. I mean, he'll bring me through stress and things like that, but God wants me to be okay so that I'm in a position to continue leading what he's put me in charge of. Mm-hmm. It doesn't speak to the heart of God and any of us to say, I'm stressed out for God. Mm-hmm. I'm at the end of my rope because I'm working for God. I'm miserable because I'm working for God. Like, that's not the nature of God. God's like, wait a minute, I want to do it in you first before I can do it through you to someone else. Mm-hmm. I've got to be able to do it in you before I can do it through you. Mm-hmm. And so, in a season and a year where everybody's dealing with anxiety, I think what's going to happen is there's going to be a lot of secondary benefits when God's people start to get it figured out in this year. Then 2027, somebody comes in and they're freaking out, and what people are learning from God the Father in 2020, they're going to be able to turn around and go, I remember that feeling. I remember being there, and that's going to be what they're going to be able to hand off. So yeah, it is fracturing. It is getting weird, and maybe the circumstances will continue to get worse. I don't know. But I know that God does good things in his people in years like this so that we can turn around and be beneficial to the people that come in, down the road.
What was the saying? Strong people make easy times.
Easy times make easy people. Easy people. Soft. Hard people make soft times. Soft times make soft people. Soft people make hard times. Hard times make hard people. It's just constantly cyclical. And I think it's been soft for like a long time. That's what makes me nervous. It's been soft for a long time.
It's been soft for a long time. What are some things not to do when you feel anxiety? Like, for instance, my dad told me this a while ago, and he said, the one thing not to do when you have fear or feel anxiety is make a conclusion in your head.
Yeah.
Because it's wrong. You know, the conclusion of, oh, my life is just like this, or, you know, God just doesn't see me, or so on and so forth. Because once you are off, you know, because it's a time, once you come off the fear, once you come off the anxiety, that conclusion is still in there. And that's damaging.
How many people are watching right now?
38.
38. All right. I'm going to say something. 38 of you, if you're watching, I want to hear your thoughts. Chime in on this point right here. Worry, because that's where anxiety really takes root, is in moments of worry. And worry is willfully leaning into the possibilities of bad, right?
Right.
That's what worrying is. Worrying is when you willfully give in to thoughts of fear. Worry and faith are the exact same thing based on direction.
Okay.
So that when you are like late at night, when you're laying in bed and you start to think about what if this happens, what if that happens, oh, wait, what if this, what if this? All you're doing is you're operating faith. Faith that the wrong thing will happen. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Faith says, I bet the good thing happens. I bet God comes through. I bet no matter what happens, God's going to pull me out of it. In the morning, hey, when I wake up in the morning, like right as the sun's coming up, earliest time of the day, and it's warm and it's nice outside, I'm telling you what, there's nothing. If you're going to get some weird off the wall optimistic call from me, it's going to be like early. I'm like, let's go. And at night, like the day's over, it's starting to settle in. That's where all of a sudden worry wants to come sneak in. So I know that about myself. I told you 38, you got to say something. And now you got nothing. Come on.
43 now.
Worry is no different than faith. It's just determined by direction. Worry is thinking and dwelling on what could happen bad. Faith is thinking about and dwelling on what could happen positively. You can just type amen or something. I just want to know who's out there. I can't get a
preach it. Say preach it.
Yeah, give me some Southern feedback. But so that because I know that about myself, then in the evenings I don't lean into things that feel like it's snowballing. If it starts to snowball, there you go. Don't watch the news or go on Facebook when you have anxiety. Yeah. Jan Wallace, what are your thoughts on worry versus fear? There you go. Hey, come on. Now
Thanks,
we're getting there. So I think that worry is voluntary. I think that fear is the result. I think fear can happen in a moment, and you got it. So okay, I'm gonna get this all messed up. But your anterior cingulate cortex and your prefrontal cortex and your amygdala, those are the three functions. Your anterior cingulate cortex, if I'm getting this right, doctors out there are gonna be like, that's not right. If you're walking through a field and you see a stick and it looks like a snake, fear triggers. 911, red lights flash, and here comes the fire department. And you look, your prefrontal cortex is your decision maker. And so you've got cortisol just coursing through your veins. Yeah, where's a snake? There's a snake. And you look to the right and you realize, oh, wait a minute, that's not a snake. That's just a stick. Consciously, you make the choice to go, okay, then we're good. Your amygdala kicks in, and the amygdala, like I said, the doctors, I might have that in reverse. I might have it in reverse.
The amygdala is the fear center.
Yep, and the anterior cingulate cortex is the love. So, so the fear center triggers, and then you see it's a stick, and the names don't even matter as much as the function of like fear is going to come at you.
Right.
Worry perpetuates that. What if that is a snake? What if it does bite me? What if I do die? What if I don't get to raise my kids? What if I never get to meet my grandkids? And then all of a sudden, the potential for fear is now a full-blown forest fire of fear. And so when you reverse that and you go, wait a minute. You're going to walk through a field. If there's a snake, get away from it. There's some life that's going to take place. Do you want to get bit by a snake? No. Ask Jeff Coelho if he's watching. Rattlesnake. Jeff Coelho got bit by a rattlesnake. Story for a different day. Okay. But the willingness to say, I'm going to live life as though this is as bad as it's ever going to get. This life that I'm experiencing right now, this life is as bad as it will ever be for me. And apart from God, here's what's crazy. Apart from God, this life is the best it will ever be. So we have to make the best of it right now. We become control freaks. We become worriers. We rob ourselves of the joy of the process because without God, this life, this is as good as it ever gets. It never gets any better than this right here. But with God, you go, it never gets any worse than this.
Right.
I don't expect it to be perfect. I don't expect that I'm owed perfection. It's one of the functions of being privileged in this nation. There are privileges that we have living in this nation. Living in this nation is one of the best privileges known to man throughout history, is the expectation that things should be perfect. And when we let go of that and we realize it's never going to get any worse than it is right now, that heaven is void of all the issues, all the snakes in the field, so to speak, it kind of lets you take it in stride and go, what am I so afraid of?
Yeah.
We have nothing to fear but fear itself.
What are some practical tips that might help in each period of anxiousness? So meaning when you feel anxious, okay, you said maybe you talk it through with Lacey or something. Is there something you go to?
Heavy drinking.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding.
That would be one of the things not to do during anxiety.
I like the idea that there's a God available in every moment. Not that God is God. God is available in every moment. And so the exercise becomes, what part of his nature do I have access to in this season? I want to get to that. That's a long question. Hang on. I want to listen to that. God is available to me in every moment. What part of God's nature is available to me right now? And it's an exercise, because I love the God of reward. I love the God of like, good job, you're doing great, everything's fine. But there's a God of like, hey, I know things are hard and I'm using that as a benefit. And I think sometimes people think, oh, God's gonna make every bad thing into a good one. We lost my little brother in a car accident. And I've said that several times. But my point is, sometimes you go through things that are just singularly terrible. God didn't say he's going to make every bad situation good. He said he's going to use the experience of every situation to our benefit. And by the way, our clock is not winding down to death. Our clock is winding up. God is shaping us for an eternal ride. So if there's a period right now where God is sort of reshaping or doing this or doing that, I can live through that because I know this is all temporary. Even if I go through something that is not good, that I can never in my mind rationalize as being good, even if it's something that is going to be bad, God's going to use that to begin to shape me so that I never let my kids leave without telling them bye. I never have a moment where I look at my kids and think no matter what, they're always going to be there. I love my kids differently. It's one of the greatest gifts my little brother ever gave to me, was that I love my kids differently. Having been through that with him, it positively shaped the way that I love the people that I care about. So, if the exercise is, what part of God's nature is available to me right now? And if I can't see it, that's where I've got to go. That's where I've got to start digging. Because if I'm like, oh, I don't feel God in this. Well, rationally, someone in the Bible has been through something that you're going through. And the workout, I mean, nobody goes to the gym and like, man, this feels so good. I've never been to a gym before. This is great. You're like, this is terrible. I have to do this. Yeah. I'll just be out of shape. Like, it's not worth it. This weekend, my mare walked out of the cutting pen, basically crippled, and it broke my heart. On my trip home from the show, I was able to listen to the podcast and sermons over the last week, and I literally cannot explain the meaning behind that and how it all helped me. I hate online anything, but you have online services through this crazy time. It's so amazing. It has calmed my fear and anxiety more than once. I didn't know that's what she was going to say. Like, that's really, really nice of her. I got halfway through it, and I'm like, of course this is going to, oh, yeah, I bet you read that one. If the truth of who God is available through the word, there's absolutely nothing about online that's secondary. Yeah. God can speak to people through a speaker just as easily as he can speak through a speaker. See what I did there? And so I think what people are learning is that, people are learning like, wait a minute, I can have preferences. I prefer live. I prefer in person. But I'm not limiting God's access to my life as only that way. And there are people, I promise you, there are people who have left this church that will not come back because they're so upset about the online thing, because preference carries such a tremendous weight in our lives that we don't get our preference. We're like, well, then I just don't feel connected here anymore. It's sad. It's weird to think. Okay, here's a doozy. When your whole life has been things going wrong, and in every situation you keep waiting for the shoe to drop, how do you move to a place of expecting greatness? Boy, I tell you what, Levi Wolf, that's a good comment. Preach. Amen, Jordan. I'm going to say his name again. Here I am, the disciple of Timothy Keller. Okay. But he said, every person in the world, they tend to believe what aligns to their bias. The general consensus is that you want to believe what aligns to your bias. It's very rare that people will come in and seek information that challenges their bias or sways them away from their opinions. And so what that means is, if God is working in our lives, like you're watching this podcast right now, and Kim, God is like pecking away. The words of what God's doing And that's one of the like challenging things of being a pastor is like, oh man, like I'm responsible for giving a voice to the gospel the best I understand it. Like that's weighty, right?
Yeah.
But if God is right now working on someone's heart, the resistance tends to be like, well, wait a minute, what about this? This is why I struggle to believe in God, and I'm not saying that's what you're saying, but like, this is why I struggle to believe this, or this is why I'm this way. You go to like a third world country where they've lost family members. Like I won't say names, but somebody that lived in this community for a while, they adopted a little gal, and that she remembered having to pour gasoline on the body of her father so the cannibals wouldn't eat him. And you're like, oh, wait a minute. Maybe my problem is not my circumstances. Maybe I'm not kind of always head shy waiting for the shoe to drop based on my circumstances. Maybe I had an expectation problem where I thought that life was going to look like what I created in my head. Here's the real problem with life. How many people are on right now?
48.
Man, you guys are quiet tonight. Come on. We see everybody else's stage performance, and we see our own backstage. So their performance on stage may look the reality of their life, what's really going on in someone's life that looks really this way or really that way, might be completely different than what you see. And you judge your own backstage, and you got clothes everywhere, clutter and problems and issues, and you're like, this is why my life isn't any good. And the reality is we don't know. We don't know what other people are going through. But our expectation level is such that when God comes in and doesn't meet our expectation, this person living in a third world country who's lost family members or is missing limbs they feel like that their life is good. Their life could never be bad now because someone gave them a soccer ball.
Yeah.
There's nobody, I'll say this, there's nobody that comes to this church that couldn't afford to go buy themselves a soccer ball.
Yeah.
I mean, so like by comparison, that person goes, God is so good to me, I got a soccer ball.
Yeah.
And then we have people that are in the United States and they're looking at someone else's life and they're going, it just seems like I'm always struggling. Sometimes what we're up against is not circumstances or difficulties. Sometimes what we're up against is an expectation of what we thought our life would look like. I'm raising my hand because I had this idea that I would accomplish this. Instead, it went this way. And so now I'm like, God, this is daily. This is every single day. I go through this of like, God, are you doing all this in preparation for where I wanted to go? Or is this like the fulfillment of the fact that I'll never... Because what I do for work, like I love the church, I love the cattle project, I love a lot of what God does in my life, but there are certain aspects of my life that I'm like, I had this idea of what would be fulfilling, what would feel fulfilling, and it's not my reality. And so do I have a circumstance problem or do I have an expectation problem? Because if I have an expectation problem and I can address that, there's a God available to me right now that makes life better in the moment. But I also know sometimes, and this is sometimes, God will not let you feel at peace where you are because he's taking you somewhere else. And in that moment where he says, move, it's time to go, it's time to fulfill new things. If he's allowed you to be too comfortable in the moment of training, you're gonna be like, no, I'm just gonna stay here. There's a book, it's called, I'm having a senior moment, The Odyssey. And in this book, The Odyssey, I'll give you the basic overview. They get to an island and they send some scouts out and they don't come back. They're trying to get home. Have you heard this?
No.
They're trying to get home. Send out some scouts. They don't come back. Like, okay, so they send out some more scouts. And finally, they're down to the last few people. Like, what's going on? So they go out there and they have found this leaf on this island that you eat, and it puts you into this trance of like, I'm happy. I'm good. I don't need anything.
Okay.
We don't even need to go home. And what they were saying was like the peace and the tranquility, the facade of peace and tranquility actually was going to stop them from reaching their ultimate destination. And I think sometimes we see somebody chewing on the leaf and going, man, I'm so happy. Their life is terrible, but we see their life and we think, oh man, if I could only have that life. You know, the discomfort and the comfort work so hand in hand, the balance, and this is not a Christian concept, but the yin and yang concept of life, that God's using the comfort and the discomfort, but all of it is to see his will fulfilled in your life, a better reflection of who Jesus is, working together, being this improved version, and he's using comfort and discomfort. And if you're only one who leans into comfort, your life will guaranteed be bad. I say that again. If all you're interested in is comfort, your life will go bad.
Have you read The Way to Love?
Who wrote it?
Levi, could you Google The Way to Love book? I can't remember.
Keto, I think that's exactly right.
Can't remember the exact one.
Amen. How do we find balance with secular self-love and biblical self-love? I always find it interesting that there is a heavy overlap. Definition, I know it sounds weird, but the definition of self and love, both have to be factored in. When you look at the fact that God said, hey, like I find value in you. I would not want my kids to ever despise themselves. Ever. Because despising yourself leads to terrible, hurtful destruction of self, right? But self-love and self-improvement from a world standpoint starts at a place of entitlement. The world starts at a place of I am owed at least this. And no matter how much you get, it always goes up. The world says you're entitled to at least this. Do you know that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is not in the Bible?
Yeah.
But we feel like that's unalienable. God starts with a position of what were we owed? Nothing. Everything is a gift. All of it. The goodness of God comes in and he finds value in me. What can I do to give back? The world operates from a deficit. You do this to fill this up. You do this to fill this up. More, better, bigger, and then you'll be okay. The concept that God comes and says, like, well, you deserve nothing, and I gave you literally everything. Well, then if that's the case, what else can I do? I'm there. I've already arrived. Now it's the details of the next couple of years. How can I be a contributor? If you're so worried about self-fulfillment first, you're going to miss opportunities to be helpful to those around you. And that is actually some of the most fulfilling aspects of life. Not when you help yourself, but when you feel like you've got such a surplus that you can be a benefit to others. Man, there's something so rewarding about watching people around you improve. Lacey was reading me the Enneagram about the 8 with a 7 wing. You can Google it if you want. Yeah. And she's like really into it right now. And she said, one of the things that's interesting is that I've got such an autonomous nature. Like I'm independent. I'm just independent. They say if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, we'll go with a team. I'm like, fast, I'll take fast. Just by myself. It's fine. I'm good. Like I would be gone all day. We had a counselor one time when we were going through our Springfield stuff for missionary training that did all this personality stuff. And he told Lacey, he goes, you need to be aware that when he's gone all day and he doesn't call and he doesn't check in and you don't hear from him for 8 hours, you got to understand that's not him ignoring you. That's just a function of his independence. But that's not all. The other function of that is I want other people to be independent and free and be like free of the bondage and free of the junk and the stuff that just kind of clutters us down. I want people to operate in freedom. So my freedom is, it's kind of like this. It's kind of like we had a horse that used to always untie himself and he would be loose, but he wasn't happy with that because what good is it if you're by himself? So he would go untie all the other horses. Like that's me. I'm that horse. But, to Jack's point, like the self-love, like one starts with the deficit, says I'll only be okay if I get to this point. The other says I'm already okay. How can I be a benefit to others? And you will never be more loved than the biggest contributor in the room. Whoever is the biggest contributor in the room will always be the most loved person in that room. Always. Joe Beers, one of the things that Joe Beers was so brilliant at, he's still so brilliant at, is he's always like, you. How are you doing? Man, I like that shirt. Like that hat. How you been? You. And I think he will say that that's a deflection sometimes, but that ultimately he's one of the most loved people in the world because he's always like, you. Tell me about you. When we get to a place where we can be outwardly focused instead of inwardly focused, we find that we are not only more accepting of ourselves, other people around us are more loving. And the things that trip us up in fear and anxiety, it's like that. It's exactly what you said about the guy that gets separated from his tribe in the woods. You feel exposed when you know you're a consumer. When you're a consumer, you know you're exposed because you're expendable and nobody would miss you if you were gone because you're the biggest liability on your tribe. But when you're a contributor, there's this feeling of safety and love and being important. That's what God is trying to express to us, is this lateral relationship where not only are we more okay based on God fulfilling us beyond what we deserve, we can also be a blessing to people around us. It's our truck driver calling. I need to call him back. Don't forget. Hard times are set up for growth and learning, for a time when you can use wisdom to help others. Absolutely. I think sometimes we tend to judge the good or the bad based on right now. Is it good or is it bad right now? And in reality, like if you were to do that, you're at the gym. Is it good right now? No, it's terrible. Then why are you doing it? Yeah. Well, there's the belief that the bad right now is going to produce good later. If the bad is bad right now, that's going to produce good later, then we get through it better. Because if we only judged, is it good or is it bad right now, we'd all go home. We'd all go to the donut shop. And what's that going to ultimately result in? Bad. See what I mean? So like the acceptance that says, even if it's hard, God's got a plan for my life. And if my life is nothing more than a living sacrifice on this planet, if my entire existence on this planet is a sacrifice, it's still better than living completely self-fulfilled on this planet and being eternally separated from God when it's over.
The book, The Way to Love, it's not like the way to love
It's
people.
the little one.
It's the little one.
Yeah, you gave it to me and I didn't read it. I'm sorry.
It's fine. The entire point is to it's 30 little meditation things to say, this is how you get to feeling love. And one of the main parts that he harps on is attachments. So attachments is, I can't be happy without blank.
Right.
So the same thing of comfort.
It's a bondage.
I can't be happy without comfort. So if you don't have comfort, you're not happy. But as soon as you get comfort, you have fear of losing comfort. Yeah. So you're not even happy with comfort.
Even when you're in it.
Even when you're in it.
Stressed out.
So it's a lose-lose game, but our entire society produces that in us. You know, we see movies of perfect families, perfect car, perfect house, everything like that. And, everybody faces it where they get to the point, they get the house, and then the water heater starts leaking. Yeah. And you're thinking, what the, or you get the house.
I got it and I'm going to lose it.
You have fear of losing it, the same thing. And so
I hate how much, I hate how guilty of that I tend to be.
Oh man, everybody does.
Church is going great. Yeah, but will it keep going great?
Right. Instead of
1017 project's going good. Yeah, but will it keep going good?
Yeah. Until it's almost like God is the leaf on that island.
Yeah.
You just kind of walk around and you're like, wow, this is great. Wherever I am. Well,
it would be hard. I mean, if you think about it, we're a capitalistic society. And if you think about it, if I were to have a commercial and I would go, hey, we made a car, but you don't really need it.
It sucks.
No, it's a great car. Okay. It's a great car. It runs great, but it's way too much money. You don't need it. Right. People are like, well, then what are you doing?
Yeah.
A commercial has to say, you need it. Your life is going to be better.
And if you get it, you get this hot
if you get it, it's going to be great.
Car.
There's a commercial for Central Oregon Community College. If anybody is listening to this commercial, shame on you. It goes, do you want to have a bigger house, a nicer car, a better life? And you're like,
see that?
Yeah, I do. I love that. That sounds great. Well, then you need the product we're selling. Central Oregon. You're like, oh, really? Really? The Central Oregon Community College is the missing link between prospect.
You get that piece of paper. You're like, okay, I got it.
No offense to community college, but it's not like that's the guarantee. You know what I mean? So, but the function of capitalism is you have to sell fear first before you can sell the product. Fear is the precursor to the product. So without the precursor of fear, it's harder to sell a product. So everything we're being sold in life is fear-based. Work to change your mindset to an eternal mindset. Yeah, Caleb, that's my cousin, you guys. That's exactly what I'm saying. I don't think you can be at peace today without an eternal mindset. That today is worth it in the scope of eternity. Today might not be worth it in the scope of today. What I'm going through today might not be worth it based on how I feel when I go to bed tonight. Mm-hmm. Not saying something. I shared something on Facebook this week that said, if I'm ever murdered, just know I ran my mouth to the bitter end. And I think that really describes my personality. There's nothing that causes more just deep frustration than wanting to say something and not being able to, because I know that people don't know my heart or would take it wrong or whatever. And so there are times where I don't say something. I go to bed that night and I'm still mad that I didn't say it. But a week later, I'm like, okay, that was probably the right thing. And I know what people are thinking, there's things you don't say. Yeah, there is.
Yeah. The book, the author is Anthony D. Mello, by the way.
You gave me that book. I still got it. I said I didn't read it, but what I meant
that's the thing is my brother gave that to me, and then I read it, and then I gave it to every single human I saw.
Yeah.
But then I gave it to you. I was like, is this right? Should I?
No, I got it. I still remember. I just haven't got to it yet. Random question. Do you think people who have a relationship with the Lord are better navigating through COVID because of the sense of hope and faith versus fear-based? Obviously there's exceptions, but overall. Okay, let me answer this. I realize what I'm about to say has the potential to sound sarcastic, and I don't mean it one bit sarcastic. So I have to preface it with that. But if everything that we do is God-based, that means that we believe he's got a benefit overall to us today. Mm-hmm. That people go, well, I'm just living for heaven, waiting on heaven. Why? If God's trying to teach you something today, it's for your own benefit. He's a good father today. Mm-hmm. And any misrepresentation of the gospel is to sell fear. Why? Because the church is the product. Remember I said you got to sell fear before you sell the product?
Yeah.
Oh, you're going to be poor. Oh, I will. Yeah, unless you give some money to the
Unless
church.
you go to the
okay.
Central Oregon Community College.
Yeah. Thank you for your gift, one-time gift. Do you want to check this box? Or how about this? If you don't uncheck this box, we're going to take it out monthly. Okay. Like sell the fear, sell the product. But based on God the Father, one of the verses talks about like, hey, look at the flower in the field. Look at the sparrow. I've had some weird, I don't know if I ought to say this or not. Lacey's going, I've had some weird moments in my life where I'm really stressed out and feeling like life is too big and what's going on. And as crazy as it sounds, I don't look for signs. I'm not like give me a sign, God. Like I'm not at all. I'm absolutely against the people who are always looking for signs. I've had 3 times in my life where I can remember out of nowhere just feeling this like life is too big. What am I going to do? How are we going to get through this? And a little bird will land uncomfortably close to me. And I'm like, and it's that sparrow. It's that reminder that God's like, do you think I don't see you? Do you think... And it always has worked out. Like it's always been fine. And I'm not telling people like go look for birds. Don't make it a religion.
I'm going to.
But to Jack's question, I don't know how someone that doesn't have that assurance of eternity and the assurance of God being in control and all the things that come with knowing the nature of who the Bible tells us that Jesus was. Let's not stop at COVID. How could you get in a car?
Yeah, dude.
How could you go outside?
Yeah.
How could you do anything? Fear could eventually paralyze you from everything. And now there's this social expectation of fear. How dare you not be afraid? I don't know how people couldn't feel fearful because you are one slip up from everything being done, one way or the other.
Yeah.
As opposed to, don't threaten me with heaven. You're going to tell me that this is a disease that could pull me out of this world that's fallen and broken and sin that I struggle with, that I fail in, that I have difficulties with, and you're going to put me in the presence of Jesus. That's what you're threatening me with?
Oh, shoot.
Now, the responsibility is I don't want to be an idiot and infect other people that are not in that position. Like there's a responsibility. There's this love for people that I have, but like, how could you get on an airplane? How could you get in a car? How could you go outside? How could you do any of the things that you do? When the reality is like, hey, you are walking on the thinnest ice in the universe. As opposed to like, I want to live. I want to raise my kids. I want to walk my daughter down the aisle. I want to be there when, Jet's going through life, and I want to be there for my wife. And I want those things. But what's the alternative? Jesus. Okay. Well, I guess then that allows me the freedom to live with a surplus instead of a deficit.
What would you say? Let's say somebody had fear of flying, right? Deathly fear of flying, or insert thing here. That's fear. So, I mean, I know it's kind of different thing than we're talking about. We're talking kind of about a chronic fear type thing. But what would you say to somebody who has like a fear like that?
I've dealt with a lot of horses, and we deal with even more cattle.
Yeah.
There are cattle that are just wired to be gentle. They just are gentle. They just are.
Okay.
And there are other cattle that like you look at them wrong and they're trying to climb over a fence. Same circumstances, same background. They're just genetically wired to be jumpy. If you're just genetically wired to be jumpy, don't beat yourself up.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't make that big of a deal of it. Yeah. Wander Snaby says, how could you get through the death of a loved one if you didn't believe? Exactly. And we go through that. Like as a pastor, we have people that are like, hey, I know that this person that died had no concept of God or wasn't interested in God or rejected him. And like that to me is one of the very few moments in life that warrant a genuine sorrow of, I can't imagine what you're going through. However, like going back to what I said about my little brother, we're only like 18 months apart. I was born in October of 82. He was born in April of 84. So, I mean, we were really close in age. We fought like that. But the reality is like his eternity is set. Thank God. That kid he was just a special kid. I get to honor the memory of that person, not based on the fact that he's in heaven now. So now I get to honor him. Regardless of that circumstance, there were things that I learned that I'm able to take and add to my life to honor who he was as a person. Take things that I learned from him growing up, from 3 to 15 years old, 2 to 15 years old, my life spent with Shay. that I get to now put into practice. Now, like I said, I never let my kids leave that I don't tell them bye and hug them. The reality is like they could go. It's also got the potential that I could be overbearing. Like, no, you could get hurt. Like I could be a fearful person as a result. However, and I probably actually go too far that direction, but there are ways to honor the memory of people, even if it didn't go the way that you wanted it to go, where instead of constantly being stuck in the sorrow, you're getting to honor the life and the memory of that person by living in a better way today. I mean, I can't imagine what it means to lose a child. I can't fathom. I can't imagine ever recovering.
Yeah.
I just can't. I can't. But if my life gets to be a reflection of someone who's able to be okay after the loss of a child, my hope is there are other people, because we went through that. I watched my mom and dad just determined to hold on to Jesus through that period, and that there've been other people that have been through that have come to my mom and dad and been like, hey, where do I even start? That there's been benefit outwardly from a circumstance that we would have never chosen. So the fear is I'll never be okay. The reality is somehow God's going to get me through this in a way that is healed on the other side of eternity.
Is there ever a scenario where it's okay to make a decision out of fear?
If there's a snake.
If there's a snake. Okay.
I don't know. I mean, how do you completely do away with your sin nature? Every decision is going to have the flavor or the smell or the hint of fear on it. It's always going to be present. I just think if you're conscious that that's what's causing the decision, to not do it. Sometimes you're going to look back and you're like, man, that was just fear. That was completely fear. You know what mine was? That if I don't do it this way, everybody's going to quit going to the church. I kept myself under such false condemnation for the first 5 years that we were here that it about put me out of business. Like I almost quit my job here because I had this fear of like, if I was honest, if I just told people what I was going through, if I told people I got to get out of here in the winter, I want to be a contributor, how would that even work? Like I made so many decisions based out of fear that I didn't know were fear in the moment. I thought they were responsibility, because that's what we do. We pat ourselves on, I'm just being responsible. I look back and I'm like, I was driven by fear for years, even here. So sometimes you don't realize you're doing it, but that's the joy of who God is that God knows the function behind every decision and has the ability to just kind of bring it back. It's going to be all right. Yeah. I know you'll be all right. And I can see vividly where he did that for Lacey and I both.
That's amazing. That's it. That was
Awesome.
great.
Appreciate everybody jumping on.
Oh, absolutely. Thank
Helping
you guys
everybody
for
start commenting.
listening.
Yeah.
Yeah, seriously. Have a fantastic day. Be calm. Enjoy people. Love people. Have a great day. Talk to you guys later. Bye.